Have you ever wondered why America became one of the most powerful countries in history? While so many other nations disappeared, collapsed, or were forgotten? The answer is not simple. Because the history of America is not only about victory. It is also a story of struggle, war, fear, dreams, and survival. And today, we are going to travel through that story together. Hello, my friends. I'm truly happy you are here today. If you enjoy learning English through meaningful and powerful stories, then you are in the right place. Please sit back, relax, and let's slowly explore one of the most fascinating journeys in human history. The history of America. No, Part 1. Before America existed. Long before the United States became a nation. Before New York, before Washington, before Hollywood or Silicon Valley. Millions of people were already living across the land. These were the Native American tribes. For thousands of years, they built communities, created cultures, hunted animals, farmed crops, and respected nature deeply. Some tribes lived in forests, some lived in deserts. Others lived near rivers or mountains. Each tribe had its own language, beliefs, traditions, and way of life. The Cherokee, the Apache, the Sioux, the Navajo. These names are still remembered today. Many people imagine early America as an empty land waiting to be discovered. But that is not true. America was already alive. Then everything began to change in the late 1400s. European explorers started searching for new trade routes and riches. In 1492, Christopher Columbus reached the Americas. Although he never landed in what is now the United States, his voyage changed world history forever. Soon after that, explorers from Spain, France, England, and other European countries arrived. They wanted land, they wanted gold, and they wanted power. At first, some Europeans traded peacefully with Native Americans. But over time, conflict grew. Diseases brought from Europe spread quickly. Native communities had never faced illnesses like smallpox before. Millions died. Wars also became common. Entire tribes lost their land. Some disappeared completely. This was one of the darkest and most painful parts of early American history. Yet European settlements continued growing. In 1607, England established Jamestown in Virginia. It became the first permanent English settlement in North America. Life there was extremely difficult. People suffered from hunger, disease, cold winters, and conflict. Many settlers died during the first years, but the colony survived. Then, in 1620, another famous group arrived. They were called the Pilgrims. These settlers traveled on a ship named the Mayflower. They came searching for religious freedom. They wanted the right to practice their beliefs without fear. For many Americans today, the story of the Pilgrims represents courage, hope, and a new beginning. Over time, more colonies appeared along the East Coast. Farmers, workers, businessmen, and families crossed the Atlantic Ocean hoping for a better future. Some became successful. Others suffered greatly. But slowly, a new society started forming. And without realizing it, the foundation of future America was already being built. Part 2. The Birth of a New Nation. By the middle of the 1700s, the 13 British colonies in North America were growing quickly. Cities became larger. Trade became stronger. and many colonists slowly began thinking differently from the people living in England. An ocean separated them from the British king. And little by little, a dangerous question started growing in their minds. Why should a distant king control their lives? At first, most colonists were still loyal to Britain. They considered themselves British citizens. But after several expensive wars in Europe, the British government needed more money. So the king began placing heavy taxes on the colonies. Taxes on paper, taxes on tea, taxes on many everyday products. The colonists became angry because they had no representatives at the British government. They believed this was unfair. Soon, a powerful phrase spread across the colonies: no taxation without representation. People protested in the streets. Merchants refused to buy British goods. Tension increased year after year. Then, in 1773, one famous event shocked the British Empire. It was called the Boston Tea Party. Late at night, a group of colonists climbed onto British ships in Boston Harbor. They threw hundreds of boxes of tea into the water as an act of protest. Britain responded harshly. The government closed the harbor and punished the colony of Massachusetts. But instead of creating fear, the punishment united the colonies even more. And finally, in 1775, war began. The American Revolutionary War. On one side stood Britain, one of the strongest empires in the world. On the other side stood farmers, workers, and ordinary colonists with limited weapons and little military experience. Their leader was George Washington. At first, the American forces struggled badly. They lacked food, supplies, training, and money. Some soldiers had no shoes during winter, but they continued fighting. Not only for land, not only for money. They were fighting for an idea, freedom. Then came one of the most important moments in American history. On July 4th, 1776, the colonies officially declared independence. A document called the Declaration of Independence was introduced to the world. It stated that all men were created equal, and that people had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those words became legendary, but the reality was still complicated. At that time, slavery still existed. Women had very limited rights, and Native Americans were not included in that vision of equality. Even so, the Declaration inspired millions of people across future generations. The war continued for years. Many Americans died from battle, disease, hunger, and brutal winters. Yet slowly, the impossible began to happen. With help from France, the American colonies finally defeated Britain in 1783. The United States of America was born. For the first time in modern history, a colony had successfully broken away from a powerful European empire and created an independent republic. The world watched carefully. Some people believed the new country would fail quickly. Others believed it represented the future. But America's challenges were only beginning. The new nation was deeply divided. The government was weak. The economy struggled, and leaders disagreed about how the country should operate. Then, in 1787, American leaders gathered to create something revolutionary: the United States Constitution. This document established the structure of the American government. It created 3 branches of power to prevent any single leader from becoming too powerful. Soon after that, George Washington became the first president of the United States. Many Americans trusted him deeply because he had led the country through war and sacrifice. Washington understood something important. Winning independence was only the beginning. Now America had to survive as a nation, and nobody knew if that would truly be possible. Part 3. Expansion, Slavery, and a Nation Divided. After gaining independence, the United States entered a new era. The country was still young, still uncertain, but it was growing very fast. More settlers moved westward every year. They crossed forests, rivers, and mountains searching for land, opportunity, and a better future. To many Americans, the West represented freedom. But for Native Americans, it often meant tragedy. As settlers expanded across the continent, Native tribes were pushed away from their ancestral lands. Treaties were broken again and again. Violence increased. One of the most painful examples came in the 1830s. The U.S. government forced thousands of Cherokee people to leave their homes in the southeastern United States. Families were marched long distances under terrible conditions. Many died from hunger, disease, and exhaustion. This event became known as the Trail of Tears. It remains one of the darkest chapters in American history. At the same time, America's economy was changing rapidly. Factories grew in the North, railroads expanded, cities became busier and more modern. But in the South, the economy depended heavily on agriculture, especially cotton. And cotton depended on slavery. Millions of African people had been taken from their homes, transported across the Atlantic Ocean, and sold into slavery in America. They were treated as property instead of human beings. Families were separated, freedom was denied, and generations suffered unimaginable cruelty. Yet even under terrible conditions, enslaved people resisted in many ways. Some escaped. Some secretly learned to read and write. Others protected their culture, music, faith, and dignity despite oppression. Over time, slavery became the greatest moral and political conflict in the nation. Northern states increasingly opposed slavery. Southern states defended it fiercely. The country became divided not only by economics, but also by values, identity, and the meaning of freedom itself. Then, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president. Lincoln believed slavery should not spread further across the country. Many Southern leaders saw this as a direct threat to their way of life. Soon after his election, several Southern states decided to leave the United States. They formed their own government called the Confederate States of America. America was heading toward disaster. In 1861, the Civil War began. It became the deadliest war in American history. Brother fought against brother. Families were divided. Entire cities were destroyed. More than 600,000 people died. At first, the war focused mainly on preserving the Union. But gradually, it became a fight against slavery itself. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring enslaved people in Confederate territory to be free. The war continued with unimaginable suffering. Then, finally, in 1865, the North defeated the South. The United States remained united, and slavery was officially abolished. For millions of African Americans, freedom finally arrived. But true equality did not. Even after slavery ended, racism, segregation, and discrimination continued for generations. Still, the Civil War changed America forever. It strengthened the federal government. It transformed the economy. and it forced the nation to confront one of its greatest contradictions. How could a country built on freedom allow slavery to exist for so long? That question would continue shaping American history for many decades to come. Part 4. Industry, Immigration, and America Rises. After the Civil War, the United States changed with incredible speed. Railroads stretched across the continent. Factories produced steel, oil, machines, and clothing. New inventions transformed everyday life. America was becoming an industrial giant. For many people, this period represented opportunity. Millions of immigrants arrived from Europe and other parts of the world. They came from Italy, Ireland, Germany, China, Eastern Europe, and many other regions. Some escaped poverty. Some escaped war or hunger. Others simply dreamed of a better future. When they arrived in America, life was rarely easy. Many immigrants worked long hours in dangerous factories for very little money. Children often worked too. Families lived in crowded neighborhoods with poor conditions. But despite the hardship, many still believed America offered hope. At the same time, huge business empires began rising. Men like Andrew Carnegie in steel and John D. Rockefeller in oil became extremely wealthy. Some Americans admired them as brilliant businessmen. Others criticized them for exploiting workers and controlling too much power. The gap between rich and poor grew wider. Labor protests and worker strikes became common. People demanded safer working conditions, fair wages, and shorter hours. America was growing richer, but also more unequal. Then, in the early 1900s, the country stepped onto the world stage more aggressively. When World War I began in Europe in 1914, the United States first tried to stay neutral. But eventually, America entered the war in 1917. Thousands of American soldiers were sent overseas. The war ended in 1918, and the United States emerged stronger and more influential internationally. But only a few years later, another crisis appeared. During the 1920s, America experienced rapid economic growth. People bought cars, radios, and modern appliances. The stock market climbed higher and higher. Many believed prosperity would last forever. Then came 1929. The stock market crashed. Panic spread across the country. Banks failed. Businesses collapsed. Millions lost their jobs. This period became known as the Great Depression. For many families, survival became a daily struggle. People waited in long lines for food. Farmers lost their land. Some Americans lost hope completely. Then Franklin D. Roosevelt became president in 1933. He introduced programs designed to help workers, rebuild the economy, and restore confidence. His leadership changed the relationship between the American government and ordinary citizens forever. Slowly, the country began recovering. But soon, a much larger global conflict arrived. World War II. At first, America again tried to avoid direct involvement. But everything changed on December 7, 1941. Japan attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The attack shocked the nation. Suddenly, America entered the war fully. Millions of men joined the military. Women worked in factories producing weapons, ships, and airplanes. The entire economy focused on war production. American forces fought in Europe, Africa, and the Pacific Ocean. The war was long and brutal. Then, in 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The destruction was enormous. Hundreds of thousands of people died or suffered terribly. Soon after, World War II ended. And when the war was finally over, the United States stood as one of the most powerful nations on Earth. But power would also bring new fears and new responsibilities. Part 5. The Cold War, Civil Rights, and a Changing Society. After World War II, the world entered a tense new era. Two major powers now shaped global politics: the United States and the Soviet Union. America supported capitalism and democracy. The Soviet Union promoted communism. Although the two nations never fought each other directly in a large-scale war, they competed constantly for influence, technology, military strength, and global leadership. This long period of rivalry became known as the Cold War. Many Americans lived with uncertainty and fear. People worried about the possibility of nuclear conflict. Schools practiced emergency safety drills. Some families even built underground shelters as protection during possible emergencies. At the same time, the United States and the Soviet Union competed in the race to explore space. In 1969, America achieved one of the most historic moments in human history. Astronauts successfully landed on the moon. When Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, millions of people around the world watched with amazement. For many Americans, it symbolized scientific achievement and technological progress. But while the country celebrated these successes, serious social problems still remained inside the nation. African Americans continued facing segregation and unfair treatment, especially in the southern states. In many communities, equal access to schools, jobs, and public services was still limited. Voting access also remained difficult for many citizens. Even generations after slavery had ended, true equality was still a major challenge. During the 1950s and 1960s, the civil rights movement gained national attention. Ordinary citizens organized marches, peaceful protests, and public campaigns calling for equal rights and justice under the law. One of the movement's most influential leaders was Martin Luther King Jr. He became known for promoting peaceful action, unity, and moral courage. His famous "I Have a Dream" speech inspired millions of people across America and around the world. The movement faced strong opposition in many places. Some activists were threatened, arrested, or harmed. Even so, the demand for change continued growing. Eventually, important laws were passed to end legal segregation and strengthen voting rights protections. America was changing once again. At the same time, the country became deeply involved in another difficult conflict, the Vietnam War. Many Americans initially supported the war because they feared the spread of communism. But as the conflict continued, public opinion slowly changed. Thousands of young American soldiers lost their lives far from home. Television brought emotional images and reports directly into people's living rooms. Public demonstrations spread across college campuses and major cities. The Vietnam War created deep disagreements throughout American society. Meanwhile, American culture itself was changing rapidly. Music, television, movies, and fashion began influencing people across the world. Rock and roll became internationally popular. Hollywood expanded its global cultural influence. Technology also advanced quickly. America's cultural presence could now be seen almost everywhere. However, the country also experienced political controversies and growing social tension. In 1974, President Richard Nixon resigned following the Watergate scandal, one of the most well-known political controversies in American history. For many citizens, trust in government became weaker. Then, during the 1980s, the Cold War slowly began to change. The Soviet Union faced serious economic and political difficulties. Finally, in 1991, the Soviet Union officially collapsed. The Cold War came to an end. For a brief moment, many Americans hoped a more peaceful future had arrived. But history would soon enter another unexpected chapter. Part 6: Modern America and the Future Ahead. As the 21st century began, the United States entered a new and uncertain era. Technology was transforming everyday life faster than ever before. The internet connected people across the world. Mobile phones became common. Later, social media would completely reshape communication, business, entertainment, and even politics. America remained one of the most influential countries on Earth. Its economy was massive. Its military was powerful. Its culture reached almost every corner of the world. But beneath the success, new challenges were growing. Then came September 11th, 2001. A day that changed America forever. Terrorists hijacked airplanes and attacked the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon near Washington, D.C. Thousands of innocent people died. The entire country was shocked. For many Americans, it felt as if safety itself had suddenly disappeared. Soon after the attacks, the United States launched wars in Afghanistan and later Iraq. These conflicts lasted for many years. Thousands of soldiers and civilians lost their lives. And debates about war, security, and foreign policy became increasingly intense. Meanwhile, the American economy continued evolving. Technology companies grew enormously. Cities like Silicon Valley became symbols of innovation and digital power. Companies changed how people shop, work, communicate, and learn. Yet economic inequality also increased. Some Americans became extremely wealthy, while others struggled with rising healthcare costs, debt, and housing prices. Political division became stronger too. Many citizens disagreed sharply about immigration, race, education, gun laws, and the role of government. Social media often made these conflicts louder and more emotional. Then, in 2008, another major crisis struck. The global financial crisis caused banks to collapse and millions of people to lose jobs and homes. Fear spread across the economy once again. Although the country eventually recovered, trust in financial systems weakened for many ordinary Americans. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic created another historic challenge. Businesses closed, schools shut down, hospitals became overwhelmed. Millions of Americans experienced fear, isolation, and uncertainty. The pandemic affected nearly every part of daily life. At the same time, debates about freedom, science, public health, and politics became even more intense. And yet, despite all these struggles, America continued moving forward. That may be one of the most defining characteristics of the country itself. America has never been a perfect nation. Its history includes slavery, war, inequality, discrimination, and painful mistakes. But it is also a story of invention, resilience, freedom, opportunity, and constant reinvention. Generation after generation, people arrived in America hoping to build a better life. Some succeeded. Some failed. Some changed the nation forever. And even today, the story is still being written. No one truly knows what America will become in the next 50 or 100 years. But one thing is certain. The history of America is not only the story of one country. In many ways, It is the story of human ambition itself. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I truly hope this journey through American history helped you not only improve your English, but also understand the deeper human stories behind the events. History is never just about dates and wars. It is about people, dreams, fear, courage, and the choices that shape the future. If you enjoyed this video and would like to continue learning English through meaningful long-form stories like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support truly means a lot. And until next time, take care of yourself, keep learning slowly, and never stop being curious about the world around you.